I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my feature author of the month of October. She is award winning author, no other than Miss Jennifer Brozak.
Hello, how are you?
Fabulous, fabulous like you, Miss Jennifer, and thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast. And as usual, can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Jennifer Brozek. I am a full time author, editor, and media tie in writer. I've been doing this full time for over 17 years now. I
Yes.
have a husband, cats, and 1,500 books.
I love your cats.
That's my
Roaming
motto.
around. Oh, sleeping. So,
She is
Miss
sleeping.
Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. We're looking forward for more award-winning piece, and I hope one day I can see it on the big screen or
Oh,
TV series. And what we gonna talk about today?
well, last week we talked about my latest novel, and this time we're talking about the Karen Wilson Chronicles, which is the omnibus of my very first urban fantasy series. I wrote this one, um, gosh, back in 2006 or 2008. I wrote the first three in 6 years, and then like 3 years later, I finished the series. Karen Wilson Chronicles is an urban fantasy series set in the Pacific Northwest. It does have gargoyles and fae and werewolves, but it does not have vampires.
Missing the vampires, eh?
Yeah.
So how did you develop the story of the Karen Wilson?
The Karen Wilson Chronicles started with the novel Caller Unknown, and I wanted to write about a completely mundane person who was thrust into the world, a supernatural world she didn't know existed. Karen is a 911 operator, and through some machinations, she's chosen by the master of the city to be his representative to the supernatural community she did not know existed. So, with her, I actually, the series was inspired by a painting by Michael Parks called Gargoyles. It is my favorite painting. And it's basically a girl blowing a bubble off the top of a rooftop and a gargoyle jumping out to catch the bubble.
So what is the central conflict or theme of the Karen Wilson Chronicles?
Well, so Kendrick is the city, and Kendrick is a special city. It is actually uh, set at the bottom of Discovery Bay in between Port Townsend and Port Angeles. Um, and there are a bunch of supernatural factions, mostly human magical factions, fighting for control of the city. And the crux of the Karen Wilson Chronicles is who is the master, because you don't know, and what makes Kendrick so interesting, uh, and the people who want to control it, why do they want to control it? Uh, and the repercussions therein of the fights between the different supernatural factions, because there's I think 10 different supernatural factions, and they're not all at war with each other, but two could be fighting, and then repercussions happen outward towards all the different supernatural factions.
So how did you structure the narrative of the Karen Wilson?
Originally, this was it's called a mosaic novel. Originally, it was part of the Edra Propinquity, which was a magazine that I ran, and each chapter is a short story that ran in the magazine in an overall arc. Uh, and I did that for 3 years. So 36 episodes, three, and plus an extra. So 39 episodes. So the structure of it is episodic, but uh, continuing. So every story has to stand on its own, every chapter, but every chapter kind of builds on the one before. So it's a mosaic novel.
So did you outline or write or organically for the Karen Wilson?
For the first two books, it was very organic, actually. I mean, I sort of knew what I wanted. I kind of knew where the beginning was, and I kind of knew where the end was, and I kind of knew some of the things I wanted to happen in the middle. And now remember, this is my first series. Many readers of the Karen Wilson Chronicles say you can see me get better as I write, because by the time I get to the third novel, so it's Color Known, then Children of Anu, and then when I get to Keystones, I'm actually having to stop and outline because I'm there are many dangling plot threads, and I have to make sure that the story still interweaves while each chapter stands on its own. And then when I finished Keystones, I just stopped writing. I just managed the magazine, and I was like, I will get back to Karen later because I don't know what the end is. And 3 years later, I think, or maybe it was, I don't, it took me 8 years to write the four books. Uh,
Wow.
I decided it was time to return with Chimera Incarnate. So I reread the three books, discovered I left two people in comas, as you do, and decided to turn that into a plot point. And from the fact that I had left these characters dangling in comas made me realize what I needed the end book to be. And then Chimera Incarnate was outlined, but it's still pretty much in the same structure as the 12 chapters, each one being a short story, but each one building on the next or the previous, and then an end story. The omnibus version here has all of those stories plus every short story I have ever written for Kendrick until this last 2 years. Um, I ended up putting a Kendrick story in the Jim Butcher anthology. Carrie Hughes and Jim Butcher did Heroic Hearts, that has a Kendrick story in it. And then I have a Kendrick story in um, another. Now, and it's a different set of people that are not in this, but it references characters from the Karen Wilson Chronicles. So by the end, I had to definitely outline.
Definitely. So, how did you create relatable and believable characters in the Karen Wilson?
Every character wants something, and whether that is hidden or not, um, I made it so that the readers could understand what people wanted and why. I also, like, one of the things that I talk about with Karen is she's adopted by a baby gargoyle, like, within the first two chapters, and she didn't even know but gargoyles existed. Uh, Sebastian is his name, and he's kind of the cat equivalent. He's the pet equivalent, but very smart. So I wanted to give that kind of connection because people, they love their pets, um, and pets can inspire characters to do things that they would not normally do, make them more brave, or fight terrible monsters when they would normally run away, or just challenge those in power to protect their pets. Uh, as I don't have children, and but I do have pets, I decided that was the route I wanted to go.
Definitely. So, what motivates your protagonist?
Karen, I can always tell where someone is in the series by what kind of fan mail I'm getting because they're so mad at me at what I'm doing with Karen. But Karen wants a break, is what she wants. Um, she has discovered there's a supernatural world. Now, as a 911 operator, she has been privy to some of the worst parts of humanity as well as some of the best. And now she's discovered there's another layer on top of it. Uh, and there's all these factions fighting for control, and she just wants people to stop. She wants them to leave her city alone. She would like everybody to sit down and have a conversation like adults. And this does not happen. And because she's not supernatural, she doesn't understand the supernatural motivations. She doesn't understand the lure of power and what comes with that. So what Karen wants is to protect her city from the good guys and the bad guys because they're all making mistakes. Now, this is not to say that she is perfect. Karen makes her own mistakes, but mostly Karen wants a break.
Yes. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat. Oh my God. Did I say it?
You did. I heard you.
So, how did you handle character development and growth for the Karen Wilson?
Uh, there are, it is not a specifically an ensemble piece. The main character is Karen, but there are secondary and tertiary characters. What I did on purpose, not all of the things or on purpose, was I had them start at a point, give them a goal, and had them complete or fail that. As they did so, a failure was not, is not necessarily a bad thing. Failing at something teaches you. So, or teaches you, or you know, if you lose something, if someone sacrifices something for you, you learn, and it has you grow emotionally. I did that with many of these characters. Some of them, there's a redemption arc. There's a couple of sacrifices. Karen at one point um, decides she knows what's right, and she gets very hard about it, and then she discovers, and the reader discovers that why she has become so much more hard and how that has been a detriment to the way she has been representing her city. At one point, there was something I set up in the first book that I did not, that came into fruition in the third book that I didn't realize I was setting up. I had a tertiary character decide that he was going to sacrifice himself for everyone. And I remember when this realization came in, I had not scripted it, I had not outlined it, I had not even thought of it, I hadn't even figured out what I was going to do with this part. And I sat down and I heard the character say, I will be the keystone for us all. Those are the sacrificial words. And I realized what that would do. He's a third tertiary character. I realized what that would do to the secondary character, and with the secondary characters, how her relationship would be affected by Karen. And I was like, I was sobbing. I went and saw my husband, and I was like, oh my God, so and so is going to die. He's going to sacrifice himself. He's like, my husband was like, you're the author. Can't you can make it not. I'm like, no, no, it's totally perfect. I have set this up. I didn't know I set it up, but it's exactly what needs to happen because it gives a progression for that character. And then the secondary character, it changes her destiny in a massive way that comes throughout Chimera Incarnate. But I set it back. I set it up all the way back in the first book, and I had no idea that I had set it up. It was just the more details I brought into it, and the way I changed the characters and the decisions I had them make, good or bad, um, moved them into line where my creative brain went, haha, I know what's going to happen. And I was very pleased with these two characters, how their secondary storyline came through. Because I don't think I mean, honestly, I'm not that smart. I mean, I'm very creative, but I'm not that smart. And especially back then, my writing chops were not as good. But by the time I get to the fourth book where I'm leaning on everything that I've already written, I was like, okay, maybe I do know how to write. Maybe this is a good thing.
You're very smart, Miss Jennifer.
Thank you.
I so I'm really sure you're very smart. So do you have a favorite character in the Karen Wilson?
Well, I will say Sebastian the Gargoyle is my favorite character, but um, he is not. I mean, everybody, even my mother, when my mom was alive and read this, she's like, if you hurt Sebastian, you and I are going to have words. But
I will
I
not
have a
talk to
character in
you.
here. His name is John Corso, and he is a collector. You'll notice there are tarot cards on the
Yes.
cover. These are based on a fictional set of mystical tarot cards called the Todari Tarot. And John Corso is one of the collectors of these tarot cards. And the tarot cards have very specific rules. They cannot be stolen, they cannot be sold, they can only be given away. If they are stolen or sold, the recipient, the person who gets it, terrible things happen, like lethally terrible things happen. And John, when I first wrote him, I didn't realize he was going to be a love interest. But because he has these cards and each card has a different magical power, his character arc and his story opens up like a flower. Now he from the beginning has told people, I am not a nice person. You should not trust me. Do not trust me. I am not a nice person. Everybody loves him. Every fan out there loves him. And I have to admit, so do I. So while he was not the main character, he was that secondary character that everybody wants to know about. So in the Karen Wilson Chronicles, I wrote a story um, of his origin story because everybody wanted to know. And you start learning just how not nice this character is. But, it's been 20, 30 years since he started collecting cards.
Yes.
So
So how did you ensure the character consistency?
I had very clear ideas what each character did and almost in an archetype. Karen was the everyman. She will never have supernatural powers. It may look like she has supernatural powers, but she doesn't have them. She only has the power that other supernaturals, I won't even say loan her.
Yeah.
They will listen to her and use their supernatural powers in the way that she wants them to. Whereas John is the collector. Um, there is the gray lady. She is basically you don't find out that she's actually the queen of the Fae until much later, um, and even that is not actually the correct term for what she is. But she has specific wants. Now there are times when I have messed up. I have two sets of twins who are Fae creatures. Um, Theodore and Theora. I can't remember. I can't remember the other two's names, but I got them. I wrote one set, and then I renamed them. The twin brothers and sisters. It looks like I renamed them, and without realizing it. So I had to make sure that everybody knew these were two different sets of twins, who were the messengers of the Gray Lady, and so I did make mistakes, especially in that first book. I renamed one of the secondary characters halfway through the book and nobody noticed until I went back and I mean, because it was a mosaic novel. Um, I didn't notice until I went back and read the whole thing from beginning to end and realized that like about chapter 6, I renamed the main character because I kind of based him on somebody I knew. His name went from Brad to David, so I had to backtrack, and his name is now David everywhere. Um, and I misspelled Lamiel. She is one of she is the head of one of the factions called Bacchanalia. She is actually based on somebody I knew. I live in the Seattle area. There is a private goth club called the Mercury or the Merc that I was a member of. And she's actually based on a person who used to go that I knew there. So there's very archetypical people. And that's how I kept the consistency for as much as I could possibly do. And if I noticed that I had messed up the consistency, I had to write in a reason why there was this inconsistency.
See, Miss Jennifer, you're really smart. So don't doubt yourself. You're really, really smart, Miss Jennifer. So, how did you choose your story setting in the Karen Wilson?
Well, so I live in the Seattle area. I have driven around Discovery Bay. I've been to Port Townsend. I've been to Port Angeles. Um, I have been out on the Olympic Peninsula. The place is amazing. It's beautiful. I decided that I originally set it more on the Olympic Peninsula, and then I realized I needed it a little bit more rural, um, or urban, I should say, rather than rural, and I moved it. I mean, that was my first mistake. I messed up the indigenous tribes where they were. So I had to, when I wrote the introduction to the omnibus, I had to explain that I made this mistake, and I have done many things to try and fix that in my story, and I've learned so much since I started. But I wanted a fictional city that could exist in the Pacific Northwest because I wanted it to have the access to the urban life, city life, and the wilderness. If the Pacific Northwest is beautiful, you can be at the ocean. Give me and 90 minutes. You're at the ocean. You're in desert. You're up a mountain. You're in a rainforest, literally. You have all of the temperate climates practically within a 2 hour distance of driving. And I chose, having fallen in love with Port Townsend, I chose to make to kind of carve out part of Port Townsend and Port Angeles uh, and set it at the bottom of Discovery Bay and call it Kendrick.
Wow, amazing. So, what techniques do you use for world building in the Karen Wilson?
So that specific one, the first thing I did, I actually used an Excel spreadsheet to actually draw out the districts within the city and where there's a there's a central park that is super important in the city. So I designed that and I used Excel block sheets to basically create where things were so I could keep it in my mind. So if somebody wanted to go from the ritzy part to the industrial part, I needed to know how long it would take them and what districts they would go through. So that was one thing I did. I drew, I drew, I don't, I created a map of the city of sorts. Um, then I looked at some of the urban legends of the area, and I said, okay, let's start playing with those. I looked at the indigenous people and some of the things that they believed in, and I started bringing in those. World building also I had a couple of conversations with 911 operators to talk about how they worked because you don't see a lot of Karen at work, but you do occasionally have her there. Uh, and then, like, Bacchanalia is based on an idealized version of the Mercury. Um, some of the more religious uh, um, groups are based on some of the Theosophy or Serpent of the Light or some of those other mystical groups is not the right word. Organizations, maybe. I have
Yes.
an antique occult literature a library. I collect antique occult literature, so I would go and I would pick out specific philosophies, books on them, and do a little bit of reading, and then see which group that would fit in. And then I created kind of the neutral no man's land, a sushi place called Sushiya. And that one is actually based on my favorite sushi joint
Oh, wow.
down in the San Francisco Bay Area. There's a place in Mountain View on Castro Street. Now, not the San Francisco Castro Street, the Mountain View Castro Street. There's a sushi boat place where I used to live down there. And I put the front part of that is exactly what that restaurant. And then the back part I just sort of turned into this nebulous casino slash um, crime organization, sort of maybe teleporting place. It's kind of this nebulous. Everybody behaves themselves in sushi. Let's just put it that way. It's why a lot of negotiations happen in that specific restaurant because it's a neutral zone.
Yes. Teleportation. So
Yeah, well, when you have go gangs sort of just from Japan, sort of randomly showing up in a Pacific Northwest town, how did they get there?
yes. Yes, 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 yes. So how do you balance description and action in the Karen Wilson?
Mm, I think I'm better at it now. I think when I was younger, I did not trust the reader to keep up, so I over described things. Uh, Now, rather than telling you that the room is, about the size of a small shed and has many, many pictures on the wall, and a cat tree just to the 2 feet to the left of the desk, I will have the characters come in and I will have them, if it's somebody who's new, they'll note a piece of artwork on the wall. Or if they're new and they're like, wow, there's a lot of artwork on the wall, it's kind of overwhelming. Or maybe they're allergic to cats, though I don't think I've ever written a character that's allergic to cats.
No.
No, I don't think so. But I have them interact with the environment rather than telling. Um, and action wise, I think we talked about this before, but all action scenes are emotional. They have emotional beats as to why they're happening, um, what each what the main point of view character is feeling, and why did they get into the fight? How does this fight go? What are the repercussions? Um, I try to make fight sequences fast because in real life, fighting doesn't take 5 minutes. Fighting takes about 60 seconds and then you're done.
Yes.
Or something has gone horribly wrong and there's definitely more than two people involved. Um, it just most people who know how to fight, the fight's over very quickly, or they know how to avoid the fight. But that would be boring. So
Yes, for sure. I agree, Miss Jennifer. So to sum up the Karen Wilson Chronicles, what narrative voice did you use?
I use third person close. Almost all of the, oh gosh, can I say that? Okay, I can still say third person close, but it did come from different points of view. Mostly it was Karen's point of view throughout the series, but there were points when I started expanding the universe where you had to see other people. There had to be interludes, there had to be stories told from completely separate points of view, because Karen wasn't there, so how would she know? So it's almost a third person universal, but it was based on a specific, it was one point of view per story or per chapter, I should say. Primarily Karen's, but not always. Um, so third person close ensemble piece. How's that?
Yes. Again, Miss Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing the Karen Wilson Chronicles to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yes, please go to my website, jenniferbrozek.com. I will say that the Karen Wilson Chronicles is self published. It is the first thing that I second thing I published through my through Apocalypse Inc. Productions, and I get the most money from people buying this specific book. Uh, if people care, it doesn't matter where you buy it from. Otherwise, my Shadowrun, my BattleTech, I appreciate you reading any of my anthologies. Um, so thank you. Thank you for coming. Sign up for my website, my
Yes.
newsletter, because I'm now putting secrets in there. I have
Oh,
learned how
wow.
to do passworded web pages. So sign up for my newsletter before November 1st, and you will get a secret that I'm not telling anybody yet.
Yes, 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 people. Let's support Miss Jennifer Brozak because if you support her, more award-winning piece to come. So, Miss Jennifer, thank you so much for being part to this podcast.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon. Thank you, Miss Jennifer. I hope I help you to promote your